would like to invite our esteemed panel guests, Mr. Dhruv Chopra, co-founder and CMO, Chalu. Mr. Abhishek Gupta, Vice President, Go-to-Market Services, Jumbo Tail. Mr. Saurabh Saha, Head Product Management, NASCOM Future Skills. Mr. Jitendra Joshi, CEO, Ambab Infotech Private Limited. And Mr. Aditya Goel, Founder and CEO, Quirkybyte. And to lead the session, I would like to invite Mr. Rohit Purohit, CEO, Without Cloud Technologies Private Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're ready, I'd like to hand you over to Mr. Purohit.
Hi, thanks, Neha. I think it's been an exciting day today, what I've been saying since morning. We're talking about MSMEs from all perspectives. And today, this session, particularly, with my esteemed panelists, we're going to talk about, a digital perspective, let's say, with a click, how you can transform your businesses. Right, or for MSMEs to increase revenue, customer base, operational efficiencies, and whatnot. My fellow panelists and I, we are going to talk about certain elements as well as what we have been learning from the industry by implementing these digital solutions, as well as being on the part of supply as well as on demand. With that being said, I think I would like to, request Saurabh to chime in because he has been leading, new product development at NASCOM Future Skills. Saurabh, if I may ask, you have been a part of this entire new vision of future skills at NASCOM, and I'm sure that there have been a lot of studies around. I would like to understand what are the skills those are needed, on today's time for MSMEs, be it on the support side, like the line of business applications. Let's say you need somebody from GST compliance, accounting to reaching customer beyond the borders, or for example, bringing somebody to lead their technology division. What are your point of views for the future jobs?
Thanks a lot, Rohit, and thanks for having me here. I think as we are moving more and more towards the innovation economy, and we are seeing some groundbreaking products coming into manifestation, we basically see some sort of a deficit in terms of the skills people would require. Now be it the startup segment or the MSME segment, I think the dearth of quality talent has always been a problem. So at Future Skills, we identified this specific issue 3 years back, and we have tried to address it through some very innovative techniques. Now, I think I think where we are marching is probably a time when India would become a global talent pool for the entire world to consume, because we are creating the best of technologists out here. And when you talk about all that, I think it becomes important to talk about the various facets of technology one needs to know. Because now, as you're seeing things like, metaverse, things like Web3, and a lot of new things that are coming into play, they will drastically change the nature of jobs that we see today. So you might not have a data scientist position over the next 5 to 10 years. You might not have something that we see today. So how do you create a workforce that stands formidable and strong, and in ensuring that the country moves forward? So I think in order to solve that problem, we just did a lot of research. We did focus groups and stuff, and we concluded that let's first talk about the technologies that are going to shape India over the next 10 to 15 years, right? And the government of India, along with the industry, companies like Google and Oracle and every other company that's there, we work together with them to figure out a set of top 10 technologies, emerging technologies, and top 10 soft skills people would require in order to be job ready. And then we created a platform called Future Skills Prime. It started as a B2B initiative, and then it became a B2C initiative because we wanted to do it for the entire country. And now how we have done it is very, very innovative. I don't think any edtech platform has ever come close to what we are doing. I don't think it has been articulated that craftily, so people understand what we are doing. But what we have done is that we have taken the top 100 jobs in top 10 technologies in every technology, and we have given every job. We have basically dissected every job into a set of skills people would require, and we have codified those skills. and industry has helped us a lot in doing that. So whatever content So, in other words, what we are trying to do is that we are trying to create a standard around a specific skill that people need to know. And then, so if the industry says that, hey, here are a set of skills that people need to know for becoming a data scientist, we will basically codify that entire thing. And we are creating content that's aligned to those specific skills. So, in other words, people are learning those skill sets, and they are basically, and through our assessments and through a lot of mechanisms in place, they're basically assessing themselves, because the next most important thing about technology is to assess whether you're really cut out for something like that or not. And that's what we have done. Obviously, because since it's a new venture, and the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has just jump started it like a year and a half back. It launched, I think last November it launched after formalization and all. So now we have close to 4 lakh plus learners who are actually upskilling themselves on the platform. And through, and let me give an example of an innovation that we have recently done. So most people, we did a study and found out that most people who come to a Coursera or maybe a Udacity, they probably don't know what technology should I follow. Like, should I go for an IoT or should I go for a data analysis course? Or so they basically ask people, look for trends that technology is trending, and they basically take a leap of faith in a specific technology without actually understanding if they have an active interest in the technology or not, right? So out here, what we have done is we have created a small product that will basically assess people on the competencies that they really like to pursue. It could be a AI, or it could be a IoT, or it could be a 3D printing, and then basically test them on those competencies to see where they stand. And based on their test, based on the way they perform, it will actually recommend courses to them, that this is where you are, this is what you need to do. So we believe that through that, we might be able to help people discover their passion for a specific technology and do only those courses that make sense to them. Of course, it's a moonshot project. The idea is to reach out to around 10 to 50 million people in the next 5-6 years, and it's pretty much a moonshot. But I think the idea is that if we try now, we might be able to reach somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years. So in the future, let's say if there is a job called a chief meme officer, and I'm seeing a lot of jobs coming up in the valley like that. You would need skills like behavioral psychology, and you would need skills like data science, right? So this position might take another 5 years to come to India. I've not seen that position in the Indian diaspora per se. So how do you train a person who wants to become a chief meme officer, right? Or how do you train a person who wants to become like an admin to a GPT-3 or a transformer, right? And these are futuristic jobs. I'm just speaking my mind aloud. So through these specific fundamental things that we are doing, we plan to create an ecosystem where people actually understand technology to the core, and they are able to basically transform their careers through it, right? And this is what is going to actually shape the innovation economy. Because if you look back at the history of the valley, Bell Labs actually paved the way for the valley to actually pop up, right? So similarly, whatever we are doing now might have an impact in the next 5 to 10 years, because it's I think one of the most important jobs is to create talent around technology. You can only build quality products and quality services when you have the talent who can build them. Be the talent in products or in data or in tech, whichever the case be. Talent is one of the most formidable pools that we cannot ignore. So and also I also feel that now that people have started talking about education per se, and the focus is shifting from the rote learning Macaulay education model that we had for 150 years to a more immersive and experiential model where students are understanding the entire antithesis of how one can solve a problem using technology, how one can use something to solve a problem, right? So we will see the ripple effects of that over the next 5 to 10 years. And what we have done at Future Skills Prime is just sort of spark that thing. And then we feel that in the next 5 to 10 years, a lot of it, just like Tesla, made its patents open and created the EV industry to talk about. We have just jump started this thing along with a very innovative mechanism, and feel that the entire edtech industry will come that, and that will also help the other sectors to basically have technology talent. Now, MSME sector is one of the largest sectors which consumes technology talent indirectly, right? So we might reach there somewhere. So our focus is on creating formidable talent from India, and I think make India a global talent pool for the entire world to consume. And that will be my 2 cents around that. Thanks.
Thanks, Saurabh. Quite an interesting insight. it has been mentioned across various reports that MSMEs are more or less touching like a 40% of the population of a country. And in that kind of impact that the MSME has, and when you build a talent for addressing various business challenges, right, and that can help more or less to grow MSMEs. I think it would be very, very interesting times, to see that how MSME can leverage these technologies. It also, adds one more dimension, and I think our next panelist, Jitendra, would be able to, provide more insights on this. So you have two kind of an MSMEs that we talk about today. I would say MSME, which is building digital solution for the company's organization, or maybe MSME or large scale or whatever it is. And then there are MSMEs which requires those skills to run those technologies, those solutions, right? So on the supply side, I have a kind of an interesting question to ask to Jitendra. That you are into this industry on the provider side, right? That what kind of a solution that MSMEs are looking for to innovate their processes, or let's say increase more revenue, decrease their cost, and whatnot, right? So, from your experience, from your perspective, what are the trends that you have observed in this solution and product? Those are designed for MSME customers, and to more details to it, what is the size and impact it could make into their businesses?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for calling me here. Very interesting question, Rohit. In last 1 year, most of the MSN were kind of reluctant putting money on tech. They were doing very few percentage or improvements. They themselves use technology to purchase products which they're not purchasing in online space. And that entire experience for this entire SME sector has kind of in terms of getting them on boarded. So we don't have to now educate them, but MSMEs are coming and saying, okay, we want to B2B commerce. So direct B2B commerce with their distributors, dealers, something is a trend everybody is asking, which is a major trend, which is that B2C is everybody is talking about it to consumer. Here, what is that is the MSs are going to dealers and distributors. They might not be going to commerce direct now, but of course, this entire supply chain is getting onboarded on the commerce. Second thing, they don't want to only sell, but they want to be actively participate and want to sell through the markets. So we have seen that can you do that through a single dashboard or a section. I can my own site is I can selling a marketplace also. Marketplaces. Trend which we have seen is using WhatsApp or any conversational AI for giving the messages, giving the communication with their suppliers as well as buyers. So what is happening is this they want to ask the customers also that we want the predictive dates. We don't want that when we put the order exactly that okay how it is moving, whether it is going to the web is processed, or that they want a real time update. So all these kind of it is can say you can when you're buying SMEs and expecting the SMEs want to give that kind of experience to the buyers. Buyers also demanding that kind of experience, which is going a lot in business. The digital payment option is very low in the SMEs. So did a survey where we found out that of the is moved, the MSME economy has moved into digital, but it is still in cash. Which we have seen a huge change because there are NBFCs on board and they are trying to get a big player to ensure that they into digital play a very crucial role in getting this on board. So these are the 6-7 trends what we are seeing, and the impact is going to be huge because it's going to be huge efficiency in overall the stages are going down. The growth, any are going to be an effect on the bottom line, top line and bottom line. The most are not most of the solutions offered are kind of a SaaS or software. So in India, there are two types of SaaS works. One is the software as and another software and a service. And both of them are very, very crucial in the on the demand. That's take.
Thank you, Jitendra. I think, yeah. Could you hear me? Hello. Yeah. Thanks, Jitendra, for your insights. So you touched upon a very important element that at times you find entrepreneurs, having that ability to foresee the kind of a solution that they would like, right? They come up with their own requirements. They try to disrupt the idea in which, the business used to perform, maybe their processes or maybe the way they reach out to a customer. At the same time, I believe there is another dimension to it, which is also, very much thoughtful. There are a set of entrepreneurs who are looking at these solutions proactively, which the small and medium enterprises are facing. And maybe nobody is looking at it as a product opportunity or an opportunity that can impact lives or that can impact large chunk of businesses. Those are unorganized and all. I think our next panelist, Dhruv has been pivotal in one of the kind of business models that they have developed for public transportation sector. And it is very interesting to see the way they have been able to drive their business model as well as use their technology to transform the way truly meaningfully medium and small enterprises are running their businesses. So Dhruv is a co-founder as well as he is CTO of Chalo, which is addressing a sizable market of a private public transportation operators across the country. So let's understand from Dhruv that how these technologies enabled, right, you as a product company as well as a service company to drive more revenue and growth for such a diversified entrepreneurs ranging from one or two asset operator to many more. And how has this, been a journey for a tech adoption for all these diversified entrepreneurs? And what are the key learnings out of it?
Thanks, Rohit. So we're in the business of buses, and very specifically, we're largely in the business of city buses. So those of us who live in Bangalore or in the Delhi area or in the Mumbai area, the buses that you see around you, BEST buses in Mumbai, BMTC in Bangalore, DTC in Delhi, that's the kind of business we're in. But at the same time, I want to also dispel one myth. Those of us who live in these big cities that I just named, think that government runs buses. The reality is that 70-75% of the city buses of India are run by private operators and not by government, actually. So it is only in these large cities that we have very, very heavy government involvement. But if we were to go to a Jaipur, if we were to go to a Bhopal and Indore, most of the UP cities, if we were to go to Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, you would find that government involvement is very, very low. A classic example is a city like Kolkata, which has had a very rich bus heritage. Kolkata has about 5,000 odd buses, city buses that run in the Kolkata area. Only 1,000 or so are government buses. The remaining 4,000 are private buses, actually. So that's an important factor in our business because when I talk about private bus operators, we are talking about people that own one bus or two buses or three buses. That's how fragmented the market is, actually. To give you an example of fragmentation, in Kochi, in the Kochi city area, there are about 1,200 city buses that ply, which are owned by about 800 different operators. So our business, our clients, essentially, those 800 operators. We also do work with large government companies, and maybe I can touch upon that later. But these 800 operators, essentially, this is the kind of work that we do. Now, the main problem in their life is that buses don't make money. You see, if you are in India and you are plying a city bus in India, the government has determined the fare for you. The government has determined the route that you shall follow. The government has determined the timings of your bus. So these are the three main levers in which you could possibly change the outcome of your business. And all three are controlled by government. They're determined in the framework that we have. And different state governments have different frameworks around all this. So, as a bus operator in India, you are almost a receiver of the entire environment and the business outcome. So, now the only thing left for you to do is to follow these rules and make sure that your bus crew, the conductor and the driver, they do a good job all day long. And, at the end of the day, when they come back with the ticket money that they've collected on the bus, it's a sufficient amount of money for you to pay the bills for the day and to refuel the bus for the next day. But unfortunately, there's a surprise waiting there as well, because it's our understanding that given that 100% of bus tickets in India are bought in cash today, right? I say 100%, you can take it with a pinch of salt. In a few cases, there's a little bit of digitization, but if it's not 100, it'll probably be 99%. With all this cash exchanging hands every day, the bus operator has no way of knowing exactly how much money was earned on his bus during the day. And if the crew has taken a part of that money, they have absolutely zero control over this. So if they earned 10,000 rupees in bus collections during the day and they come to the operator and they hand over only about 8,000 rupees to the operator saying, this is how much money we collected, the bus operator has no option but to just take that quietly. And that exactly is the situation they deal with. There is a pilferage rate in the region of 20 to 25% across most bus markets that we've seen ourselves so far. So this is their problem, and this is the real issue. Why we have such low quality bus services in India? Because if the bus won't make money, and if it's going to be on a subsistence model like this, then which operator would invest more in improving their bus services, right? Why would they give us a cleaner bus? Why would they buy a second and a third bus to deploy on these routes and so on, right? It wouldn't work. And why would any third-party private enterprise ever want to come and invest in a business like this, right? It wouldn't work. It's not attractive. So if you don't have an attractive business model, no one will invest in it. No one will invest in it. We're going to continuously get worse and worse services, and then we will stop taking the bus, as many of us already do. I'm sure it's nobody's dream in India to travel by bus, right? Everybody, all the colleges that we go to, if you ask students, listen, as soon as you can afford it, how many of you are going to go out and buy a bike or a car? Almost 100% of the class always raises their hand. And that's the reason why we have all this crazy traffic and congestion in our cities, right? So those of us who live in Bangalore and complain about taking 2 hours over 5 kilometers, one simple answer could be, if everyone was on a bus instead of in a bike or a car, then your city wouldn't be like that, actually, right? So that's really, and we believe that the state of our cities is closely linked to the mode of daily travel, right? And so this is the reason why we solve for buses today in tech. Now, what technology can do in this scenario is essentially start. The first most important thing technology can do is go to the heart of the problem, which is you're not earning enough money, so why would you invest? Is to start solving that. So what Chalo has done is we've developed technology on both sides, for the bus operator as well as for the passenger. For the passenger, we deploy technology through the Chalo app as well as the Chalo card, which is a prepaid card. We give them live bus tracking. We have a live passenger indicator which shows people exactly how crowded the bus is before it even comes to your stop. We have mobile tickets, mobile passes, and on the prepaid card, you can recharge the card and make a payment with the card instead of having to worry about change ever again. We've also introduced a whole new series of bus passes for regular passengers, which is another, I think, unique thing, that in India, for some reason, bus passes have never really been very, very popular, although they're very, very popular in many other parts of the world. That's on the passenger side. On the operator side, we've developed technology platforms for them to actually run their day-to-day operations using technology instead of manually, so that they have a clear-cut view, minute by minute, hour by hour, trip by trip, how much is their bus earning, what is the kind of ridership that they're getting on every single trip, the analytics at the end of the day, the reporting at the end of the day, the cash settlements for them at the end of the day, and so on. All of that is taken care of for them. So with the combination of these two, what happens is that on the passenger side, we start increasing ridership, because now you no longer have to, wait for the bus. You can actually see how many minutes away the bus is on the app, and then you can just go to the bus stop maybe 1 or 2 minutes before the bus comes. And that actually completely changes the experience for passengers. So that's a huge step forward. The second big friction point for passengers is once they're on the bus, there's a lot of friction with the crew. If you try giving a 50 rupee note for an 8 rupee ticket, you're never going to see the last 2 rupees. You'll only get 40 rupees change back. And these small things, they really do matter. So by digitizing payments from cash into digital, whether it's on mobile or through the card, that takes away the second largest friction point. The combination of these two things alone actually has increased ridership between 25% and 70% in some of the cities that we've operated in, and in a space of just about a year. And this I am talking about in industries which for the last 2-3 decades have been absolutely flat. And in some cities like Mumbai, we have even seen declining bus ridership, right? Which is a cause for great alarm, because if you look at the city of Mumbai today, and then if you say, the next 100,000 people are also going to jump into a private vehicle instead of public transport, you can just see the nightmare that is waiting to happen. So we increase ridership on this side, which increases revenue for the operators. On the other side, we increase transparency and control over operations, so that they can actually have far tighter controls over their crew and what's going on their bus every single day. Now, all of this creates a massive delta. And remember what I said at the beginning, nobody can invest in a bus. So one of the first things we learned was that we can't charge the operator upfront for this. So one of the unique things we had to develop was a business model where we invest in all the technology that has to be deployed for the operator, and we just charge them a small amount per day on that. And so we make most of our money today only after the bus operator actually starts increasing their revenue. We take a share of that incremental pie that we generate for them. That's primarily how we work with them. And that solves the first part of tech adoption, which is affordability. Otherwise, if you go to a bus operator and say you need to invest, 50, 70,000 rupees in your bus to start bringing technology into it, and then eventually you will make more money one day, that would have never happened. So that's the first part of the tech adoption struggle that we had. The second part of it is actually that the operators are instantly satisfied once they see systems like this. But the second part is actually the crew. The crew actually sees that their additional income stream vanishing as you bring in more technology and more digitization into buses. So that's a human challenge to solve, and a business challenge to solve that. And then there's the passenger side, who are the third key stakeholders in all this. The passenger side is actually significantly easier. What we have found is that passengers are very, very happy, and they are very, very quick to adopt technology systems like this. So so the crew remains the main challenge now in the tech adoption in this system. And the last stakeholder in this equation is governments. Government partners are actually incredibly happy, because for the first time ever, we can provide them very detailed and very transparent and live data on exactly what's going on in public transport systems in their city. So I think that's really the outlay on the 4 different stakeholders that we have and on the tech adoption piece. Yeah, back to you, Rohit.
Yeah, thanks, Dhruv. Such an insight, and I'm sure that it's a learning for many MSMEs just to find a ways to adopt a technology, or maybe if you're building a solution for MSME, I think you need to evolve around your business model as well to reduce their cost to introduce the technology, as well as to have them believe, into a technology. But at the same time, if you address to their customers as well using that technology, if your touch point is till that point, I think they would have a compelling reason to move into a technology, right? I think adoption of a technology, or I would say use a click rather, in the perspective of this session, is no longer a matter of a choice. It's a matter of a time. If you do it today, it's better for you. If you do it tomorrow, maybe a little okay. Day after, the more delay you do, the more benefits that you are losing, right? Based on the time. I think we have a very interesting perspective to be discussed with our next panelist, Aditya Goel. Aditya Goel is running multiple businesses altogether, and I think so far as we understand, I think it's a magic of a technology that he has been able to drive through multiple operations, being very lean, being very agile, and he has an experience being on the demand and supply side as well. So Aditya, to you, I would like to have your opinion around the difficulty it is, right, for emerging technologies to be adopted for MSME. I think at times as an MSME, you feel that, do I really need a metaverse kind of an office? At times I feel that, do I really need a payment solution when everybody is able to, give me the cash? Or maybe at the same time, somebody says that, okay, there is an AI solution that can retain your customer. They won't really think about it because their customers are just within the 50 square kilometer of a city, right? They may feel that they don't really need a Bahi Khata or that kind of a tools. Tele is all okay, and then they have 50,000 rupees a year for accountant and all. But at the same time, they may miss also the larger part. How do you adopt the latest technologies like AI, ML, like metaverse kind of a thing? How do you be future ready when future skills are there, which are building next generation of people who would like to work on the technology and all, and you want to be relevant as an employer to them as well. So my not kind of a question, but a kind of an area that I would like to open to. How difficult it is to adopt, or what kind of a role that these emerging technologies would have, and how businesses can leverage them across various functions, payment technologies, marketing, customer outreach, and whatnot. And
Perfect.
at last, sorry, it's a little longer. And at last, I know that you have experience working with entrepreneurs, and you have been to a school at a Cambridge with, and where you spent a good amount of a time across different entrepreneurs coming from different countries. How do you see these common elements all across the places? Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Rohit. So, first things first, actually it is quite difficult for an any MSME to adapt to a new technology. And if you adapt to a new technology, it can cause a lot of, human cry initially. It can cause a lot of hue and cry initially. But what happens is over the time, let's go back 1.5 years. We got hit with the pandemic. Now, what it did to all those businesses which were operating in a 50-kilometer radius was that they cannot immediately shift their customer base. Their customer still wants the products. But the government has asked you that there's a lockdown because it cannot be avoided, of course. Now, most of them are ordering from Amazon or from online from some e-commerce platforms. Now, those businesses who were already online, they got a lot of benefits out of it. But those who were not online, they were completely shut down. Imagine a Kiryana store which is operating right now, and they have certain things which can be delivered to their customer online. Right? Number one is that you cannot, today the customer wants more feasibility. Today the customer has so many choices that sometimes the customer gets confused that what they want to buy or what they want to do with it. You go to any let's say a hypermarket store and you're standing there, you just wanted a box of milk, and now you have 50 different flavors in front of you, 50 different brands. Now this is soy milk, this is 2%, this is what you don't end up buying anything. Now imagine that there's a system which tells, okay, these are our needs, you are allergic to this, you're allergic to that, you enter it, and subsequently you just are left with two options, this milk and that milk. Now imagine how easy it is for a customer to buy and how easy it is that you can increase your sales from that point of view, right? That is one aspect. Second aspect is that how much payment processing is very much like online payment processing these days. I mean, I don't have to explain this. It's self-explanatory that payment processing is very important these days. That the payment, you directly process it and it directly goes to your bank. But the problem is, as much as we're talking about digital India, we still charge a convenience fee from the customer, and the customer will mind it. Why are we charging a 2% convenience fee? When we want everything to be digital, then there should be no convenience fee. So that is something which a business has to pay from their own pockets. See, we have faced it. For example, let's say you go on a platform, you have to make a digital payment. Any payment above 10,000 rupees, any payment platform, Paytm, InstaMojo, or Razorpay, they end up asking you to pay a 1% fee. So that means that is a big hassle for any MSME, because when you're building a startup, that 1% can be a difference in your cash flow. Imagine 10,000 payments there. So this is something which we need to change, and that is somewhere a lot of businesses are facing a lot of hue and cry that they need to change this. Now, if you talk about the demand and supply side both, which was the initial thing. So what happens is that at Green Brew, what we did was that we had this we had certain vendors from whom we used to buy our sourcing products, and we made our own system that okay, whenever we need it, our factory was linked to our main office, and whenever we needed restocking, so we used to get an alert that okay, now we need a restock. So we used to mail them, and then we used to actually get that way. Also, we asked some of our vendors, some of our retail shops. Actually, this morning only, I had a very beautiful conversation with someone, and that person told me that we do not need sales personnel every day to reach out to shops, to reach out to those retail stores. We just can have a single platform where you're running out of store. You just place an order there, and you can get all the supplies then and there. That reduces so much hassle, that reduces so much time, that actually practices the just-in-time techniques. Yeah, it reduces jobs. I mean, I'm like not anti-jobs, but it increases the profits at the end of the day. And as far as the workforce is concerned, I agree with Saurabh. He was saying that we need to upskill a lot. I was and he said that there is some behavioral psychology which is coming up. Well, Saurabh, we already hired a behavioral psychologist like 3 years ago, and subsequently we have been doing quite well because at Quirky Byte we run a media organization, and there we have a position called chief meme officer. We have people who actually produce memes and everything, and so what happens there is it's actually changing. The dynamics have changed because media and psychology determine how you reach the customer. And like Rohit pointed out, he gave so many points. I'm just trying to remember all of them. So yeah, so customer outreach has changed completely. And then coming to what I learned from Cambridge with my experiences at Cambridge. See, when I was working with them, the technology adoption there is quite faster. It's they are miles ahead of where we are in India, because we just entered the digital revolution like 2 or 3 years ago, not before that. And after the pandemic, you're going to see a huge lateral shift in how the businesses which are run by IT are going to succeed. They're going to get a lot of funding, and they're going to change the way we see how it operates. The traditional business is not going anywhere, mind you. It won't go anywhere. It just needs a bit of an upskilling there. And the challenges which are faced are still, I'm going to say outrightly this, that the government is still not supporting that. They might promote Digital India a lot, but till you enable a fees, till you have a fees on it, like 2%, 3%, make it free. Why not make it free for everyone? So that way you'll promote digital payments, because any MSME, they find it very hard. Like, Rohit, in cloud technologies, they have become cheaper right now. Earlier, they were so expensive. And, when you take these terms out, like, cloud, AI, ML, or, metaverse, half of the people don't understand what it is. It's the world is so complex. However, it is very easy. What is ML? It is just a data crunching thing. You just, if you look at ML, it is just crunching old data and giving you prediction about future data. It's as simple as that. If I have to make someone, a 5-year-old, understand that what is ML. So it's not that difficult to understand these stuff. It's just that, people are making a hue and cry out of it. Cloud is nothing. You're just hosting, something on the cloud. So all these technologies and everything, what the problem I feel around the metaverse or, all the AI and the cloud technologies is that, it's advertised in a way that it sounds too complex. It's very easy. Very honestly, it's very easy. It's not that difficult. So you can always talk about all these things and end up doing nothing. The end result of any business is to make a profit. I mean, that is whether you operate a media business, a services business, or a product business, or like, Dhruv runs the buses business. His end goal is to make a profit only. No one, of course, any social enterprise also is there to make profit so they can run their social enterprise in a better way. So end of the day, the balance sheet counts, and the balance sheet can only count the better way till you reduce your costs. And the technologies can help you reduce your costs. And that is how businesses should look forward to it. And the best part is technology can reduce time. It has helped us reduce time. It has helped us, improve our efficiency, our employee efficiency. A simple system like, where you can calculate how much time a person is taking for a task can help you improve your efficiency. It's very simple. It's a very simple technology that you ask your employee to input the time they took for a task when they're starting and when they're ending. And it suddenly improves your efficiency there. Right? I mean, so it can be as simple as that, and it can help you succeed in that manner. But it all depends upon how willing you are to change. And mind you, the businesses who have not changed over time, they have died down. They have actually right. So there's no point if you don't change with time. The best example for this is Reliance. I really love giving Reliance example. They started with selling what? They started with selling polyesters. They started with petrochemicals. Today they are still selling petrochemicals. They were in the oil business. Now today they are in telecom business because they are realizing that because they are changing with time, and that is how MSMEs should also adopt. And for us, the scenario changes every 6 months because we don't have as deep pockets as a Reliance or a Tata. So that is the reason we need to be upskilled about it. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. So just to summarize a few of the points that you mentioned, don't feel fearful of a technology. Find a way to adopt it rather than having a fear, right? At the same time, to be relevant, you also, as an entrepreneur or as a key person to drive that change in the organization in MSME, you also need to be a part of that change and then drive the digital transformation. About one thing I would just like to comment, Aditya, I believe that in many ways, the Indian tech ecosystem is way advanced in terms of scalability, ability to build a solution that can scale very quickly. I think our ecosystem is the strongest that can build solution for billions. And I believe what Saurabh was mentioning in the beginning, I think that's what is going to take the course in next 3 to 4 years. Very interesting, dimensions. Uh, in the meantime, I would like to request audience, in case you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A section. So we can, keep answering those also in between. Now, so if we look at this session, going back to the session, so starting from the ideas of the skills that Saurabh mentioned, to the kind of solution those are being required to run the businesses and to be more efficient, those are required to be built. That what Jitendra mentioned. To the kind of opportunities those are there for the challenges those are not yet addressed, and there could be a different ways. What Dhruv has mentioned and Aditya mentioned around the ability for an organization to adopt these technologies could transform their future. Now, there is one aspect of it, or I would say an element of which needs to be discussed also, and that's why I have a very special question for Abhishek Gupta. He has been leading an operation at Jumbotel. Abhishek, to you, Jumbotel is a renowned marketplace, right? So at times, as an MSME, you don't really need a lot of technologies to be adopted. You may just need to reach out to a technology provider, just plug yourself into it. When your manual operation, which does not require technology, it ends, that's where you connect with a platform which takes your solution, your product or a services to the larger place to remove, for example, a middleman, to, for example, not to really worry about marketing and all sort of a thing, or maybe, spending on inorganic activities of it. So marketplace has played a vital role. You just name it. E-commerce is also not less than a marketplace. Whatever is being sold, aggregator and all, more or less it's moving in the same direction to be defined. So my question to you, Abhishek, is how these modern day marketplaces enabling the MSMEs to reduce their cost to market and increase revenue by reaching out to addressable market beyond borders.
Yep. Sure. Thanks, Rohit, and thanks for having me here. I think when you look at marketplace as a concept, and I'll try to use both B2C marketplaces as well as B2B marketplaces as an example, though we are ourselves only a B2B platform. I think it's B2B as well as B2C marketplaces are helping us, irrespective of the size of the organization on the other side, which wants to reach the market, on four aspects. One is, I think, the sheer democratization and the low entry barriers. Right today, for example, if I have to look at 20 years earlier, or say even 10 years or 5 years earlier, if I was to set up a distribution system for a product that I manufacture, I would perhaps have to look at the leading players of the industry having put up a lot of entry barriers, wherein only the large distributors would be working with them, and hence for you to simply find the right channel partner would be difficult. Today, that is no more a case, right? Wherein you can, as you rightly pointed out, you can latch onto a marketplace, plug and play, and take your products anywhere. So in that sense, the democratization as well as the entry barriers are far lower. I think the second aspect which is being taken care of is in terms of efficiencies, both in terms of cost as well as time, right? Say, for example, on our platform today, if you look at it, somebody can launch their product within 72 hours, right? Whereas again, going back in time, if you were to launch that kind of a product in a single city, you will perhaps as a manufacturer go and try to first set up your sales force, ask them to appoint channel partners, then time in the logistics, etc., right? So the sheer difference in terms of speed is quite stark, and time to market is literally like a myth now, right? The other, on the cost efficiencies also, if you look at it, all the activities that I spoke to you about, right, in terms of setting up your distribution system, salesforce, etc., typically can cost any organization at the starting stage 25 to 30%, right? Now think of every fixed cost as well as these costs to be variable costs, and you could literally reach the market in half the cost, right? And then as you rapidly scale up, you could bring down your or use your economies of scale to save costs on the other parts, and then continue to drive your channels. The third, I think, the aspect is the data and transparency, right? Earlier, even if you want the access to technology or such solutions, would be cost prohibitive, as Aditya also mentioned, and some of the other people as well, right? That today, for example, in Jumbotail, that data is available to you, right? For no cost, literally. Whereas if you were 5 years earlier, you would have to perhaps find a Salesforce automation app, or you would have to have digital systems running at your distributor points, etc., etc. Today, that is no more a case. What that also does is, in terms of transparency and price distortions that used to happen earlier, say in between markets, especially for smaller players, any price fluctuations in two different markets could lead to a lot of havoc for their value chains, right? That transparency is also available, and in marketplace, it's a fairly open for all kind of a thing. And I think fourth part, which marketplaces are allowing people to go ahead with, is innovation. So, for example, as a platform, we realized that when we started helping the Kirana, right? I mean, we were literally the only player during the COVID times, wherein in our home territory, our business actually went up 2x, right? And that's when people realized our value. And when we spoke to them, we realized that there is even a further potential of helping them increase their business. In the spirit of Chalo, for example, right now we are running J24 stores, which is our more of an extension into the B2C space. What that does is it allows us a foothold in the outlet. Not this is our supplies, but the fact that we can increase the demand, right? In the same space today, that same outlet can actually keep 600 SKUs versus say 300 SKUs, because I am available on demand. And at that time, when a manufacturer comes in, right, we allow that manufacturer to step into those stores with a far more purposeful entry, wherein they could actually experiment with their products. 72 hours is an entry time, but if you want to pull out a product also, it's as simple as that, right? So with that kind of a concept, we are actually closing the full loop as well, wherein the consumer facing feedback through a J24 store goes to a manufacturer takes that input, uses maybe some other digital platforms to create products, and again come back to the marketplace to launch them in a seamless manner. And within, say, a 30 to 60 days cycle, you could actually literally launch as many products as you want. And one point that I would specifically want to touch upon is that I think digital is maybe disruption, but not necessarily disintermediation, right? Including a lot of noise that people would have heard about distributors, etc., right? I think every technology platform will be an enabler and will face a challenge, wherein a country like ours, wherein there is more than a billion of population, there will be opportunities to not just disrupt, but partner, right? So for example, as Jumbotail itself, today we have around 360 distributors that we are working with in a rural space as well as tier 1 and tier 2, because a lot of these products which find it difficult to reach those kind of markets, we realized that we could actually take them into the most deepest of hinterlands and help the local entrepreneurs also, who want to kind of walk away from systems which force them to block their working capital to a large extent, because large players typically have their own way of functioning, large brands, etc., who would want exclusivity, who would not want them to work for different brands altogether. So I think that's the other space wherein we are actually innovating with these channel partners, helping them again accelerate their business rather than just replacing them, right? Because the last mile cost, no matter how much we hear about a lot of platforms, still Indian ecosystem allows every platform to figure out how to break even in terms of the unit economics. It will always be a challenge, right? So those last mile costs are best served actually in each market with the market expert. So we are partnering with them, allowing them to come onto our platform as our partners, and seamlessly for a manufacturer, right from say a metro to a rural space in say Muzaffarpur in Bihar, you would actually go within 24 hours on the same platform. So I think those four aspects is where marketplaces are helping, and I think there'll be a lot of more developments wherein there'll be forward as well as backward integration on both the parts, both from the operator's part, manufacturer part. But what our mantra, for example, is that in the next 5 to 6 years, what we anticipate is that there'll be at least say 500 brands which are 100 crores each, maybe, versus say a HUL which is the behemoth, right? And the only and first signs of this are wherein you see D2C brands like Wow, Mamaearth, etc., and then they will get onto the B2B marketplaces, reach the masses. So in that kind of a space, I think there is a lot more scope for everybody to grow, both on the demand side as well as the supply side.
Great, Abhishek. I think one needs to reach out to you if they really want to go very fast, and let there be your worries rather than them. Let them focus on their core businesses.
Correct. They can focus on demand, and rest everything can be taken care of by someone else, not just us, but I think any marketplace.
Wonderful. So we've got a couple of questions. I think those are well answered already, and we have a couple of minutes. I think let's have a little fun around. Maybe quick questions that we can do a round or two to each other. Maybe I'll start with Saurabh. Saurabh, what is the best future skill that you see in next 5 years? That if somebody is aspiring to have those skills, those are very, very in high demand. They get the best salaries, best vacations, and all. What could there be? Which industry and what skill?
So I would probably take a step back and kind of, it's not exactly one skill, but I think some of the skills that we really need are never taught in school, which is ironical. We need to understand, we deal with people all our lives, we have never taught psychology in school or in college, right? We have never taught about money, in school and college. We only understand money, and I think only once we have spent like 10 to 15 years, we're basically. So I think if you talk about it retrospect, what are the skills people need to basically have? I would say that you need to teach them about human psychology, the behavioral psychology, social psychology, evolutionary psychology, whichever the case be. You also need to teach them about finance and money. I recently read this book called The Psychology of Money. And I think one thing that I understood is that I did not know anything about money till I read that book. So one skill, in fact, two skills that I would want people to know would be understanding psychology and understanding how it's applied in real world when you interact with people. There are different kinds of people with different kinds of idiosyncrasies, different kinds of thought process. And I think one more, and psychology is deeply linked to anthropology. So even as a data scientist, if you do not seem to have an idea about behavioral psychology, I don't think you'll succeed or go that far, because it's all about understanding data and providing a context to the data, which is directly linked to how behavioral psychology is exploited. So to answer that question, I would say that behavioral psychology and money are two things that people should know as we move further towards the innovation economy.
Sure. So you should know before you spend, right? You should not.
You should definitely, yeah. No doubts about that.
Fantastic. So the next to Dhruv, which cities, I would say, the private bus you would like to ride? Given a choice, the first preferred ride. Maybe it's a time for you to also recognize somebody.
No. I have a very straight answer to this. Indore is one of my favorite cities to visit. It's not a private bus system; it's a government-run bus system. The iBus that they have, it's a world-class BRTS system. BRTS stands for Bus Rapid Transport System. You see these around the world. You go to Indore, forget about around the world. Any of us and people who are listening in, please visit Indore. Please use the BRTS system. you will start asking questions of the people who make decisions on your behalf with your money. When we look at the kind of money that goes into building metros and the kind of time that goes into building metros, you could install a BRTS in your city in 1 month on the existing roads that are there. I mean, those of us who live in Mumbai, if you go to Indore, I promise you will come back questioning, saying, why don't we have this on the Western Express Highway in Mumbai connecting Bandra to Borivali, right? Why are we building these crazy metros for the last 10 years? Just install the bus system and we are done. It'll take 1 month. It'll be solved by January, I promise you, if we were to take this approach in this city. So yeah, my straight answer is go to Indore. Gujarat has a lot of good BRTS systems as well. I haven't personally seen them, but I've heard a lot about them. So if you're in any city with a modern BRTS system, please use it. You will start questioning the need for metros, I promise you.
Great. Next is to Jitendra, which is, I would say, a software an MSME should have, just to have more happiness at work. Any tool or anything.
More happiness at work.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I think they're already.
A tool that. I bet WhatsApp is not running a company. You guys all know WhatsApp is something that you should not have in the organization.
No, but
maybe something like playing a game.
The conversational guy, right? WhatsApp the way they're using, if they use for customer service or even internal chatting, I think WhatsApp is a great way to go about it, because we have seen so many examples.
Yeah, just to simplify that, let's talk about a tech sector. Which is the activity you would suggest to all the tech service providers to incorporate within the company once in a year to have a fun around?
Sorry, it was addressed to me?
Yeah, it was you. Okay, I think, so what I was saying, for example, having, e-gaming platforms or something like that, would there be something that is more exciting, or doing some other things outside the virtual would be more exciting?
I think outside the virtual, I think we need to get back to the real life. Virtual is...
maybe we can take all of them to Indore in the bus. Right?
Yeah, so that will be great. I think
something about that sort.
So all of them using the BRTS and having great food, the chat around Indore will be great.
Great. Abhishek, which is the product that you would prefer anybody to look at your platform, the most preferred product to look for, if somebody is a buyer?
As a buyer from our company stable?
Yes.
Look at our Jumbotail Core app, the marketplace app. You will realize how simple it is to take your product to the market, actually.
Great. Aditya, which is the next role that you are hiring, apart from Chief Meme Officer?
So, right now, I think we are hiring, let's say, someone who can roast movies these days. Roasting people. Yeah, this is what we're looking for. So
Chief Roasting Officer.
Chief Roasting Officer. Actually, not kidding. I'm not actually kidding about this. Because this is working really well. The stand-up comedy space is working really well. And one more thing, to answer Dhruv's question, that why are we building the metro projects? Well, it's a very controversial answer. I hope I don't have to answer it here. And I hope you get it. You don't get it?
No, I don't, and I don't want, to be honest, because I don't know where you're going to lead me. I think we are good. In case any more questions from audience, happy to have panelists. If you have anything, to say on the closing notes, this is a stage for you.
I think there's one question in the audience in terms of outsourcing their tech needs or hire to find solutions. How should they decide on amount of costs to allocate?
Yeah.
I think one thing which I usually speak to our customers about is, don't expect business answers about your business from others. I think they know the best, right? So when it comes to allocation of costs, I think it's important for the owner of the business themselves to understand their value chain. And there are enough and more specialized as well as integrated players to pitch in for every need of theirs. And hence that need should define the solution rather than the cost, because I think that's where digital can actually help you. That if you continue to look at it in terms of allocating a cost, versus what is the most important piece of your value chain wherein you need tech are two different kind of thinking. I think that needs to, that would be far more beneficial for the owner of the business.
Well, I agree. I have also one point to add. So at times you feel that technology is very cheap. At times you feel that it's very costly, but you need to look at it, what's worth of it. You know, going for a transformation, as I said before, like it's just a matter of a time, right? It doesn't mean that you should start it way early when you're not ready for that change, because that change is bringing change within your organization also. Like one of the very well-known quote about the change management from I think Niccolo Machiavellian was, it doesn't matter how perilous the change is, what matters is to believe in the order. But when you define that order to get change, you need to be mindful of bringing that change in the organization, at what cost, at what value, what you're trying to achieve, right? What benefit that it is going to do. And then maybe you can work around the way in which you can then adopt these technologies and as well as incorporate that cost. That's 2 cents from my end. At least I get to say something.